Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another Devblog for update Ixwa strike, and this is the A6M5 Hei. This is a plane which actually wasn't on the dev server, but it was in the files, and I'm really happy to see it. There's something really wonderful about flying Zeros in War Thunder. They have quite a unique playstyle compared to a lot of other aircraft, and the A6M5 Hei comes in with that and a little bit of an extra punch, which will always help it out. As somebody who has really enjoyed the A6M5, the A6M5 Otsu, and also the A6M5 Co, which is the premium, it's nice to see that we have another addition to the lineup. On top of this as well, the A6M5 Hei is going to be a standard tech tree fighter, so therefore it's available for everybody, and also will be at rank 3. We'll have to see if it's folded in with the other A6M5s or if it's going to be a standalone. My guess will be it will be independent, and then later on will be folded with the rest. Anyway, let's get into the history of this aircraft. The story starts in 1944 with the A6M5 Otsu, which failed to meet the expectations of the Japanese military leaders at the time. It turned out to be more of a half measure in an attempt of the aircraft engineers to modernize the A6M fighter. And at the time of 1944, unfortunately, Japan had no replacement for their outdated Zero, or at least one which they couldn't mass produce. And the aircraft that had been designed to replace the Zero, they kept suffering setbacks, whether it was engine deficits or it was just general production issues in Japan itself. So with this, and also the increasing threats of American high-altitude bombing raids coming in, Japanese engineers pretty much were forced to further modify the A6M, despite knowing that it was inferior to a lot of the Allied aircraft which was flying at the time. So in September 1944, Mitsubishi rolled out the A6M5 Hei. It was a modification of the late war Zero design, but outfitted with a stronger weapon arsenal. This also included an expanded range of secondary weapons for the aircraft to carry. Tests of the aircraft revealed substantially degraded performance characteristics over previous variants due to the weight increases on it, and as fitting the aircraft with a different, more powerful engine wasn't possible at the time, the A6M5 Hei was accepted into service nonetheless, despite its performance issues. However, as the A6M5 Hei entered production in the last stages of World War II, its production numbers remained low, chiefly due to the decreasing Japanese industrial capacity in the final months of the war. In total, there was around about 90 of the A6M5 Heis, which were produced by Mitsubishi alone by the end of World War II, with no available production data from Nakajima. So, even though this plane was designed once again as a vehicle to try and stop the the high altitude, attacks from the bombing range of America, it wasn't able to succeed like many before it. As someone who has researched, bought, and spaded all of the Zeros in the game, I'm really happy to see another one, mainly because the Zeros offer a very unique playstyle, which isn't the same as pretty much any other set of vehicles in the game. The closest ones are the Spitfires, where the Spitfires are obviously incredible turn fighters, but even as you go through the ranks of the Spitfires, you do get more energy. You are able to get the bigger engines, you are able to hold that advantage over your enemy. You are able to climb, you are able to do all of these things, and you are able to dive on them at amazing speeds. Whereas as you go up the line with the Zeros, the playstyle of them gets way more defined, meaning that you stay a turn fighter, you don't gain the energy over some of the previous models, and instead you actually just become a pure turn fighting machine. And this is actually really fun to play, and also incredibly fun to play against. Now, it is really easy to get suckered in by Zeros, the A6M5s. If you engage with them in a turn fight, especially with something like a Soviet aircraft, you will lose. And that means that when you face stuff like the A6M5 Hei and the Otsu and the Ko and the A6M5, you have to be able to disengage, get the energy advantage again, re-engage, and keep doing it over and over and over again, forcing the Zero down. And if the Zero pilot knows what they're doing, they can defend against that over and over and over again. And it becomes this wonderful, battle of turn fighter versus energy fighter, and it's just wonderful to play and also incredibly fun to watch. Now, the A6M5 Hei coming in as another one of these vehicles which should be pretty good at that is lovely to see. The only issue with this one, though, compared to some of the other models already mentioned, is this one is a lot heavier. We're talking about a vehicle which has not just increased armament, but also areas for secondaries, which are going to make it heavier as well. So basically, the difference between this and the Otsu is the Hei modification removes the single rifle caliber machine gun and replaces it with two further wing-mounted 13.2s. The heavy machine guns, and it also retains the 20mm from earlier in the series. So pretty much the standard armament will be the two 13.2s and also the two 20mm. These hopefully will do a lot of damage to the vehicles that you're fighting, and also, you know, be able to have enough ammunition so you can actually carry a game. One of the problems with the Zeros in general, and why turn fighting is so important, and why staying close to your enemy is incredibly important, is because you only get, I think it's 120 20mm rounds, and one of the problems with that is these 20mm on the Zeros are probably some of the worst in the game. They have a pretty low muzzle velocity, they don't do a ton of damage, so you have to make sure to land them in order to cripple enemy planes. But with the 13.2s as backups, that should help out a lot when it comes to actually dealing with a lot of the enemies. Now, the suspended or secondary armaments of the Zeros, you know, being able to carry bombs, being able to carry rockets, all of these things I think are interesting, but don't really make too much of a difference to the aircraft. I find it very hard to believe that anybody is going to take this thing into ground RB to ground pounding. I think there are much better options. You know, the P1Y1 isn't too bad. The B7 with its 800 kilo bomb, these are always going to be better options than something like an A6M5 Hei. So having a look at this plane and thinking about, you know, what to do with it, I still think this is going to be used in an aerialistic sense, and it's going to be used to try and play the air superiority role. Now, just because it's going to be slightly worse at it, because it's heavier and because it's not as maneuverable, doesn't mean it won't do a good job. I personally think that the Zero does have a little bit of wiggle room, like it can give up a little bit of its handling to be able to still be that monster of the air in a turn fight. The only thing it's also giving up, though, with its heavier armory, is the energy advantage. The Zero, the reason why it can constantly turn, the reason why it can constantly sit in a turning fight, is because it's able to produce enough energy to get the next turn off incredibly quickly compared to the enemies. And if you lose that, if you lose so much energy from moving around, then you could lose that advantage as well, and you just become a very heavy plane where its engine is not able to push it around. But I don't think, you know, upgrading from 7s to 13.2s should make that much of a difference. We'll have to see when the general flight model comes out for the machine, but all I can say is I'm just so happy to see another Zero. It's one of those things I've been looking forward to for a long time. You know, there's still a few weird and wonky Zeros that they could add, and also it's another mid-tier vehicle which can be, you know, grinded out. This update, there is a ton of stuff for rank 1, 2, and 3. You know, you've got the new South African vehicles, the Harringtons, you've got the Hero Shah, you've got the A6M5, and you've got many others, including also the Battle Pass vehicles and everything like that, meaning that it isn't just high-tier stuff that is getting love. It's a bunch of different things from a bunch of different nations, and that can only be positive when it comes to the general player who wants to play their nation or wants to play interesting vehicles at every single rank. I'm happy to see this plane. I hope we get more like it. There are many that could be added, and I'm sure they will be in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hosest Kishol, Hans, Bareen, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.